"We'll process your admission paperwork, Mrs. Wilson. Your son said he'd be back soon." The emergency room nurse's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Gregory wasn't coming back anytime soon. I nodded, clutching my chest where the pain had struck just hours earlier, watching my son's expensive Audi disappear from the hospital parking lot through the waiting room window. "Just a quick business meeting, Mom. I'll reschedule, but these investors are only in town today." His words, delivered while checking his Rolex, still rang in my ears. "Vanessa can't come either. She has that charity luncheon. You understand, right?" I always understood. I'd been understanding for 42 years. The triage nurse guided me to a curtained area, her gentle hands belying the pity in her eyes. "Family emergency?" she asked, helping me onto the examination table. "Very important meeting," I replied, the familiar taste of disappointment metallic on my tongue. "On a Saturday?" She raised an eyebrow, checking my blood pressure. "That's dedication." Or neglect, I thought, but didn't say. I'd become an expert at not saying things, like how I hadn't mentioned the lottery ticket. The one I'd purchased on a whim at Henderson's grocery 2 weeks ago. The number's a combination of Gregory's birthday and the date my husband Thomas died. The ticket I'd checked just 2 days ago, staring in disbelief at the Minnesota State Lottery website as 6 matching numbers transformed my teacher's pension reality into a $4 million future. I hadn't told anyone, not even Maggie, my closest friend since our first teaching jobs together in 1979. The ticket remained hidden in my copy of Jane Eyre, page 247, right where Jane decides she must leave Rochester. A fitting place for a ticket to freedom. "Your heart rate's elevated, and that chest pain concerns me," the nurse said, attaching monitors to my chest. "The doctor will want to run tests. You might be here a while." I nodded, thinking of Gregory's casual wave as he left. 8 hours it would turn out to be. 8 hours alone in a hospital while my only son attended not an emergency meeting, but a leisurely golf game with potential clients. I would discover this later through his wife's Instagram post. "Saturday business means luxury networking at Cedar Hills. Chakra blessed, chakotir work hard, chakors play harder." The same son whose college education I'd paid for by working summer school and night classes for years. The same son who now lived in a lakefront mansion while I remained in the modest rambler where I'd raised him after Thomas died in that construction accident. The same son who called dutifully on holidays but always had an excuse when I asked to see the twins. "Just a few tests, Mrs. Wilson," the young doctor assured me, reviewing my chart. "Have you been under unusual stress lately?" I almost laughed. Was discovering you suddenly had $4 million stressful? Or was it the realization that even with financial security, you were still fundamentally alone? "Just the usual," I replied, offering the pleasant smile I'd perfected over decades of parent-teacher conferences. Hours passed, tests were run, blood drawn, EKGs administered. I answered questions, followed instructions, and watched the hands on the wall clock circle with agonizing slowness. "Angina," the cardiologist finally concluded. "Stress-induced, though there are some concerning markers we'll want to monitor. I'm recommending an overnight stay for observation." I nodded, thinking of my empty house. At least here, people checked on me periodically. "Should we call your son?" the nurse asked, glancing at the contact information in my chart. "Let him know you're being admitted?" "He's in an important meeting," I said automatically, the words worn smooth from decades of use. "I don't want to disturb him." She gave me that look again, pity mixed with something harder. "Mrs. Wilson, you're having cardiac issues. That's more important than any meeting." Before I could respond, the curtain parted, and a young Latina nurse entered, her name tag reading Sofia Mendez, RN. "I'm taking over for the evening shift, Mrs. Wilson," she said, her smile reaching her eyes in a way that made my chest ache differently. "Let's get you settled upstairs. Have you eaten anything today?" I realized I hadn't, not since the toast and tea before my collapse. "I'll bring you something," Sophia promised, patting my hand. "Hospital food isn't great, but it's better than nothing." As she helped me into a wheelchair, my phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. "Meeting running long. How's it going there? Need anything? Need anything?" I needed a son who wouldn't leave his mother alone in an emergency room. I needed family who valued me beyond what I could give them. For the first time in my life, I needed to put myself first. Before I continue, don't forget to join our group, where you'll have access to exclusive stories without ads directly on your cell phone, and you don't even need internet to watch. Just go to the first pinned comment. "No," I typed back. "Everything's fine." Another lie in a lifetime collection of them. But as Sophia wheeled me toward the elevator, past the families clustered anxiously around their loved ones, I made a decision. The money would remain my secret. Not forever, but long enough to see the truth about my relationships. Long enough to discover who Dorothy Wilson was, beyond mother, widow, and retired teacher. long enough to learn what happened when I finally put myself first. Your son? Sophia asked, nodding toward my phone. Yes, I replied, tucking it away. But he's very busy. Too busy for this? She asked, her directness startling me. I had no answer. Or perhaps for the first time, I had the beginning of one. As the elevator doors closed on the emergency room where I'd spent 8 abandoned hours, I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. For the pain that had brought me here. For the son who had left me. For the 4 million reasons I now had to reinvent my life. And for the blessed silence about those millions that would finally let me see the truth. My hospital room had 2 occupants before me, judging by the remnants they left behind. A forgotten tube of lipstick in the bathroom, and a pamphlet on managing diabetes crumpled in the trash. The sterile space would be mine for at least 24 hours, the doctor had explained, while they monitored my heart and ran additional tests. Sophia brought me a tray with soup, a sandwich, and a cup of Jell-O that trembled with the same uncertainty I felt. She pulled up a chair while I ate, her presence unexpectedly comforting. You should call your son again, she suggested, checking my IV line. Even busy people make time for hospital visits. I smiled politely, deflecting as I'd done for decades. He has important clients. More important than you? Her directness wasn't unkind, just unfiltered in a way I found both startling and refreshing. Before I could formulate a response that preserved Gregory's dignity and mine, my phone rang. Maggie's name flashed on the screen. Dorothy? Where are you? I've been knocking at your door for 10 minutes. Her voice, familiar as my own heartbeat after 40 years of friendship, filled the sterile room with warmth. I'm at Mercy General, I explained, watching Sophia discreetly step out to give me privacy. Had a little episode this morning, just keeping me overnight for observation. What? Why didn't you call me? The hurt in Maggie's voice made me wince. I'm coming right now. It's not necessary. Shut up, Dorothy, she interrupted with the bluntness of true friendship. Which floor? Unlike my son, Maggie arrived 20 minutes later, slightly breathless, her silver bob askew and arms laden with my nightgown, toiletries, and a paperback mystery. Thought you might need these, she said, dropping everything to hug me. You gave me a real scare, Dot. It's just angina, I assured her. And Gregory? Where's he? Her eyes, sharp behind purple-framed glasses, scanned the empty room. He had an important meeting. Maggie's snort spoke volumes. Still making excuses for him, I see. He's busy building his career. He's 42 with a corner office and a 7-figure salary. His career is built. She took the chair Sophia had vacated. When are you going to admit that your son treats you like an afterthought? Her words stung precisely because they echoed thoughts I'd been suppressing for years. Thoughts that had grown louder since that lottery ticket had offered me options I'd never had before. Actually, I said slowly, I've been doing some thinking. Maggie leaned forward, intrigued by something in my tone. What kind of thinking? I hesitated. Though I'd decided to keep the lottery win secret, Maggie wasn't just anyone. She was the friend who'd held me when Thomas died, who'd covered my classes when Gregory had pneumonia in 3rd grade, who'd been more family to me than my own blood relatives. If you had a chance to completely change your life, I asked carefully, would you take it? Her eyes narrowed. Dorothy Wilson, what are you not telling me? Just as I opened my mouth to confess or deflect, I wasn't sure which, Sophia returned with my evening medication, followed by a tall, distinguished doctor with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mrs. Wilson, I'm Dr. Harris. I'll be overseeing your care tonight. His voice carried a slight southern drawl that seemed out of place in Minnesota. How are you feeling now? Better, thank you. I was suddenly aware of my hospital gown and disheveled appearance. The initial tests show stress-induced angina, but there are some irregularities in your blood work I'd like to monitor. He reviewed my chart. You live alone? Yes, but she has a son, Maggie interjected pointedly, who's apparently too busy to be here. Dr. Harris's expression remained neutral, professional. And you are? Maggie Callahan, best friend since Carter was president. He smiled, revealing a single dimple. It's good you have support, Mrs. Wilson. These episodes can be warning signs we shouldn't ignore. After examining me and explaining tomorrow's tests, Dr. Harris departed with a gentle pat on my arm that lingered a moment longer than strictly necessary. Well, Maggie raised an eyebrow. Dr. Handsome seems attentive. Don't be ridiculous, I felt heat rising to my cheeks. He's just doing his job. And I'm just noticing he's not wearing a wedding ring. Maggie! She laughed, then grew serious. Now, back to this life-changing opportunity. Spill it, Dot. The moment had come to either lie to my dearest friend or share my secret. Looking into Maggie's expectant face, I made my decision. I won the lottery, I whispered, glancing toward the door to ensure no one was passing. $4 million. Maggie's jaw dropped. For perhaps the first time in our friendship, she was speechless. The Minnesota Mega? She finally managed. The one with the drawing on Tuesday? I nodded. Holy? And you haven't told Gregory? No one. Just you now. I leaned forward. And I'm not going to tell him. Not yet. Why not? This solves everything. You can quit pinching pennies, travel, move somewhere warm for winter. That's exactly why, I interrupted. If I tell Gregory about the money, I'll never know if his sudden attention is for me or for what I can give him. Again, understanding dawned on Maggie's face. You want to see how he treats you without knowing? Precisely. I've spent my entire adult life making excuses for his behavior, Maggie. Telling myself he's busy, he's building something important, he'll have more time for me later. My voice caught, but being left alone in that emergency room today, it finally made me see clearly. That your son is a self-absorbed workaholic who takes you for granted? That I've enabled it, I corrected. By always being available, always understanding, always putting his needs first, by making it so easy for him to ignore me until he needs something. Maggie took my hand, her expression solemn. So what's your plan? Besides giving your bestie $1 million or $2 million? I laughed, the tension breaking. I'm going to watch and wait, see how he and Vanessa react when they think I'm just their same old mom with her teacher's pension. And then what? I thought of the life unlived while I'd focused on raising Gregory, teaching other people's children, and carefully managing my limited finances. The trips not taken, the passions not pursued, the dreams deferred. Then I'm going to live, Maggie. Really live. For however many years I have left. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone lit up with a text from Gregory. Sorry about today. Super busy. Vanessa says hi. We'll try to visit tomorrow if meeting wraps early. Maggie read it over my shoulder and snorted. Wow, Father of the Year. I showed her Vanessa's Instagram post from the golf course. That little... Maggie caught herself. So the emergency meeting was golf? Classic? And that, I said quietly, is exactly why I'm keeping my secret. $4 million has a way of suddenly making busy people find time for you. As evening settled into night and Maggie reluctantly departed with promises to return tomorrow, I lay in my hospital bed watching shadows play across the ceiling. For the first time in decades, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. The freedom that comes with clarity, with finally seeing truth instead of comfortable illusions. Tomorrow would bring tests of my heart's physical condition. But the real test of my family, my relationships, and my own courage to finally put myself first was just beginning. And for once, I was ready. The hospital discharged me on Sunday afternoon with a prescription for heart medication, a referral to a cardiologist, and strict instructions to minimize stress. Dr. Harris delivered this last directive with a knowing look that suggested he understood how impossible it might be. Family can be our greatest support system, he said while signing my discharge papers, or our greatest stressor. Which was yours? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. His pen paused. Both, at different times. My late wife was my rock for 30 years. My daughter in Seattle calls once a month, like clockwork. A small smile, for exactly 15 minutes. Better than my son's schedule, I replied. Major holidays and medical emergencies. Sometimes, Gregory had texted that morning. Tied up with clients all day. Vanessa can pick you up at 4. I'd replied that Maggie was already arranged, sparing him the inconvenience of disrupting his Sunday. Dr. Harris handed me his card. My direct number, he explained. Any concerns about your heart day or night, please call. I tucked it into my purse, beside the folded lottery ticket that now represented not just money, but possibilities. Thank you, Dr. Robert, he corrected. Since I'm hoping you'll use that number. Before I could respond, Sophia appeared with a wheelchair. Ready for freedom, Mrs. Wilson? More than you know, I murmured, conscious of Dr. Harris, Robert's lingering gaze, as Sophia wheeled me toward the elevator. Your friend is waiting downstairs, she said. The one with the purple glasses and big laugh. Maggie, I confirmed. We've been friends since we started teaching together in 1979. That's beautiful, Sophia said. My mother always says, true friendship is God's way of apologizing for family we can't choose. I laughed. Your mother sounds wise. She is. Cleaned houses for rich people for 30 years to put me through nursing school. Sophia's voice held pride and fierce love. Now I take care of her. That's how family should work, no? Her words lingered as she helped me into Maggie's waiting Subaru. How family should work, indeed. Call me if you need anything, Sophia said, squeezing my hand. I volunteered to be your follow-up nurse for home visits this week. You've got a fan, Maggie observed as we drove away. And maybe a doctor admirer too? I saw how Dr. Dreamboat looked at you. Don't be ridiculous, I said, though the memory of Robert's dimpled smile warmed me. He's just thorough. Thoroughly interested. Maggie turned onto Maple Street. So, lottery winner? What now? Champagne? Shopping spree? Quitting Minnesota winters forever? Now, I said firmly, we observe. I need to see how Gregory and Vanessa behave when they think nothing has changed. And then? I stared out the window at the passing suburbs, identical houses where people lived their quietly desperate lives, making the best of limited choices, just as I had, until now. Then I decide who deserves to be part of my new life. My observation period began that very evening when Gregory and Vanessa made their first appearance at my house in over 3 months. They arrived precisely at 6:30, the twins conspicuously absent, with a grocery store bouquet and a rotisserie chicken. "We can't stay long, Mom," Gregory announced, checking his watch as he set the chicken on my kitchen counter. "The Hendersons invited us for drinks at 8. Vanessa air-kissed my cheek, her diamond earrings catching the light. "The hospital didn't mess up your hair too badly," she observed, as if this were the primary concern after a cardiac event. "Just my heart, dear," I replied mildly. "How are the twins?" "At a sleepover," Gregory answered, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "So, what exactly happened? Your text wasn't clear." I explained the angina diagnosis while heating the chicken they'd brought, but clearly had no intention of sharing. Vanessa nodded periodically, her attention on my living room. "You really should update in here, Dorothy," she said, fingering my curtains with distaste. "It's all so dated." "On a teacher's pension?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm afraid dated is what I can afford." Gregory finally looked up from his phone. "Speaking of finances, Mom, have you thought more about that assisted living brochure we sent? Golden Sunset Acres has a reasonable monthly rate, and you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance." Ah, there it was. The same conversation they'd been pushing for 2 years. The reasonable facility that was actually the cheapest in the metro area, conveniently located an hour from their lakefront home, making visits even less likely. "I'm quite comfortable here," I replied, setting out plates they wouldn't use. "This house is paid for, and I know all my neighbors. But after this heart scare," Vanessa began. "Angina," I corrected. "Not a heart attack." "Still," Gregory interjected, "you're not getting younger. What if something happens when you're alone?" The same son who'd left me alone in an emergency room for 8 hours was now concerned about my solitude. I bit back the response I wanted to give. "I'll manage," I said instead. "Sophia will be checking on me, and Maggie is just 3 blocks away." "Sophia?" Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "My home health nurse." I smiled, remembering Sophia's warmth. "She'll visit 3 times this week." Gregory checked his watch again. "We should get going. The Hendersons are very punctual." They departed with promises to call soon, leaving the chicken largely untouched and my house feeling emptier than before they'd come. I stood at the window, watching their BMW pull away, cataloging the encounter like the teacher I'd been for 35 years. Observation number 1. 20-minute visit to their mother-in-law after a hospitalization. Observation number 2. No offer of ongoing help or support. Observation number 3. Immediate pivot to discussing moving me to a facility. The pattern was clearer than ever. I was an obligation to manage, not a parent to cherish. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hope you're settling in well. Hospital food withdrawal yet? Robert, Dr. Harris." I stared at the message, a smile tugging at my lips. Another buzzing followed, this time my landline. I picked up to hear Maggie's eager voice. "Well, how was the dutiful son's visit?" "Educational," I replied, settling into my armchair. "And brief. They had a social engagement." "Of course they did," Maggie snorted. "So, what's your next move, Powerball?" I considered the question, running my fingers over the lottery ticket I now carried everywhere, my tangible reminder that everything had changed, even if no one else knew it yet. "I think," I said slowly, "it's time to dangle a small carrot, just to see what happens." "A carrot?" "Yes. Tomorrow I'm going to casually mention that my Aunt Beatrice's estate finally settled and I'll be receiving a modest inheritance. Nothing dramatic, perhaps 75,000. Maggie laughed delightedly. "Enough to be interesting to them, but not enough to be life-changing. Oh, Dot, you're wickedly brilliant." "I'm learning to be," I replied, glancing at Robert's text again. "I'm learning many things, actually." After hanging up, I crafted a response to Robert. "Hospital jello withdrawal is real. Thank you for checking on me." His reply came moments later. "My professional recommendation? Real food and good company. Perhaps dinner when you're feeling stronger?" I stared at the message, my heart fluttering in a way that had nothing to do with angina. At 67, was I actually being asked on a date? By a handsome doctor? In my old life, the life of just 3 days ago, I would have deflected, made an excuse, put others' needs before any personal happiness. But in this new reality, with the weight of the lottery ticket in my pocket and the lightness of possibilities unfurling before me, I typed, "I'd like that very much." Then I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, surveying the practical, unremarkable clothes that had defined Dorothy Wilson, dedicated teacher and self-sacrificing mother, for decades. "Time for some updates," I murmured, thinking not of Vanessa's condescending suggestion, but of the woman I glimpsed emerging from the chrysalis of my former life, the woman who had survived abandonment in an emergency room, the woman who had won $4 million, the woman who was finally ready to put herself first. The hospital discharged me on Sunday afternoon with a prescription for heart medication, a referral to a cardiologist, and strict instructions to minimize stress. Dr. Harris delivered this last directive with a knowing look that suggested he understood how impossible it might be. "Family can be our greatest support system," he said while signing my discharge papers, "or our greatest stressor." "Which was yours?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. His pen paused. "Both, at different times. My late wife was my rock for 30 years. My daughter in Seattle calls once a month like clockwork." A small smile. "For exactly 15 minutes. Better than my son's schedule," I replied. "Major holidays and medical emergencies? Sometimes." Gregory had texted that morning. "Tied up with clients all day. Vanessa can pick you up at 4. I'd replied that Maggie was already arranged, sparing him the inconvenience of disrupting his Sunday. Dr. Harris handed me his card. "My direct number," he explained. "Any concerns about your heart, day or night, please call." I tucked it into my purse beside the folded lottery ticket that now represented not just money, but possibilities. "Thank you, Doctor. Robert," he corrected, "since I'm hoping you'll use that number." Before I could respond, Sophia appeared with a wheelchair. "Ready for freedom, Mrs. Wilson?" "More than you know," I murmured, conscious of Dr. Robert's lingering gaze as Sophia wheeled me toward the elevator. "Your friend is waiting downstairs," she said, "the one with the purple glasses and big laugh." "Maggie," I confirmed. "We've been friends since we started teaching together in 1979. "That's beautiful," Sophia said. "My mother always says true friendship is God's way of apologizing for family we can't choose." I laughed. "Your mother sounds wise." "She is. Cleaned houses for rich people for 30 years to put me through nursing school." Sophia's voice held pride and fierce love. "Now I take care of her. That's how family should work, no?" Her words lingered as she helped me into Maggie's waiting Subaru. How family should work, indeed. "Call me if you need anything," Sophia said, squeezing my hand. "I volunteered to be your follow-up nurse for home visits this week." "You've got a fan," Maggie observed as we drove away. "And maybe a doctor admirer too? I saw how Dr. Dreamboat looked at you." "Don't be ridiculous," I said, though the memory of Robert's dimpled smile warmed me. "He's just thorough." Thoroughly interested. Maggie turned onto Maple Street. "So, lottery winner, what now? Champagne, shopping spree, quitting Minnesota winters forever?" "Now," I said firmly, "we observe. I need to see how Gregory and Vanessa behave when they think nothing has changed. And then?" I stared out the window at the passing suburbs, identical houses where people lived their quietly desperate lives, making the best of limited choices, just as I had, until now. Then I decide who deserves to be part of my new life. My observation period began that very evening when Gregory and Vanessa made their first appearance at my house in over 3 months. They arrived precisely at 6:30, the twins conspicuously absent, with a grocery store bouquet and a rotisserie chicken. "We can't stay long, Mom," Gregory announced, checking his watch as he set the chicken on my kitchen counter. "The Hendersons invited us for drinks at 8. Vanessa air-kissed my cheek, her diamond earrings catching the light. "The hospital didn't mess up your hair too badly," she observed, as if this were the primary concern after a cardiac event. "Just my heart, dear," I replied mildly. "How are the twins?" "At a sleepover," Gregory answered, already scrolling through emails on his phone. "So what exactly happened? Your text wasn't clear." I explained the angina diagnosis while heating the chicken they'd brought, but clearly had no intention of sharing. Vanessa nodded periodically, her attention on my living room. "You really should update in here, Dorothy," she said, fingering my curtains with distaste. "It's all so dated." "On a teacher's pension?" I raised an eyebrow. "I'm afraid dated is what I can afford." Gregory finally looked up from his phone. "Speaking of finances, Mom, have you thought more about that assisted living brochure we sent? Golden Sunset Acres has a reasonable monthly rate, and you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance." Ah, there it was, the same conversation they'd been pushing for 2 years. The reasonable facility that was actually the cheapest in the metro area, conveniently located an hour from their lakefront home, making visits even less likely. "I'm quite comfortable here," I replied, setting out plates they wouldn't use. "This house is paid for, and I know all my neighbors." "But after this heart scare," Vanessa began. "Angina," I corrected. "Not a heart attack." "Still," Gregory interjected, "you're not getting younger. What if something happens when you're alone?" The same son who'd left me alone in an emergency room for 8 hours was now concerned about my solitude? I bit back the response I wanted to give. I'll manage, I said instead. Sophia will be checking on me, and Maggie is just 3 blocks away. Sophia? Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. My home health nurse. I smiled, remembering Sophia's warmth. She'll visit 3 times this week. Gregory checked his watch again. We should get going. The Hendersons are very punctual. They departed with promises to call soon, leaving the chicken largely untouched and my house feeling emptier than before they'd come. I stood at the window, watching their BMW pull away, cataloging the encounter like the teacher I'd been for 35 years. Observation number 1. 20-minute visit to their mother-in-law after a hospitalization. Observation number 2. No offer of ongoing help or support. Observation number 3. Immediate pivot to discussing moving me to a facility. The pattern was clearer than ever. I was an obligation to manage, not a parent to cherish. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope you're settling in well? Hospital food withdrawal yet? Robert, Dr. Harris. I stared at the message, a smile tugging at my lips. Another buzzing followed. This time, my landline. I picked up to hear Maggie's eager voice. Well, how was the dutiful son's visit? Educational, I replied, settling into my armchair. And brief. They had a social engagement. Of course they did, Maggie snorted. So what's your next move, Powerball? I considered the question, running my fingers over the lottery ticket I now carried everywhere, my tangible reminder that everything had changed, even if no one else knew it yet. I think, I said slowly, it's time to dangle a small carrot, just to see what happens. A carrot? Yes. Tomorrow I'm going to casually mention that my Aunt Beatrice's estate finally settled, and I'll be receiving a modest inheritance. Nothing dramatic, perhaps 75,000. Maggie laughed delightedly. Enough to be interesting to them, but not enough to be life-changing. Oh, Dot, you're wickedly brilliant. I'm learning to be, I replied, glancing at Robert's text again. I'm learning many things, actually. After hanging up, I crafted a response to Robert. Hospital jello withdrawal is real. Thank you for checking on me. His reply came moments later. My professional recommendation? Real food and good company. Perhaps dinner when you're feeling stronger? I stared at the message, my heart fluttering in a way that had nothing to do with angina. At 67, was I actually being asked on a date? By a handsome doctor? In my old life, the life of just 3 days ago, I would have deflected, made an excuse, put others' needs before any personal happiness. But in this new reality, with the weight of the lottery ticket in my pocket and the lightness of possibilities unfurling before me, I typed, I'd like that very much. Then I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, surveying the practical, unremarkable clothes that had defined Dorothy Wilson, dedicated teacher and self-sacrificing mother, for decades. Time for some updates, I murmured, thinking not of Vanessa's condescending suggestion, but of the woman I glimpsed emerging from the chrysalis of my former life, the woman who had survived abandonment in an emergency room, the woman who had won $4 million, the woman who was finally ready to put herself first. Aunt Beatrice left you how much? Gregory's voice rose an octave over the phone. About 75,000, I repeated, keeping my tone casual as I watered my African violets, after taxes and fees, of course. I didn't even know you had an Aunt Beatrice. The suspicion in his voice was thinly veiled. My mother's sister, lived in Duluth. We weren't close, but apparently blood counted for something in her will. The lie flowed smoothly, surprising me. In 35 years of teaching, I'd prided myself on my honesty. But then, this wasn't really a lie. It was a test, an experiment in human nature. That's unexpected. Gregory paused, and I could practically hear the mental calculations. 75,000. Not life-changing money, but enough to be interesting. We should talk about how to handle this, Mom. Financial planning is literally my job. I'm having lunch with the bank manager next week, I replied. Just preliminary discussions. The bank manager? Mom, those guys just push whatever products have the highest commissions. Let me help. Better yet, let me bring in my team's wealth advisor. I suppressed a smile. 4 days. It had taken exactly 4 days since the inheritance news for my son to find time in his schedule. 4 days for the son who couldn't spare an hour during my hospitalization to suddenly offer his expertise. That's thoughtful, Gregory. Why don't you and Vanessa come for dinner Friday? We can discuss it then. Perfect. I'll bring Stanley, our advisor. He's brilliant with smaller portfolios. Smaller portfolios? Of course. Actually, I said, let's make it just family for now. I'm still processing everything. A pause. Sure, Mom. Whatever you're comfortable with. After we hung up, I sat in my sunny kitchen, considering the ripples my small stone had created. Gregory's sudden attentiveness. The dinner invitation accepted without hesitation. The immediate offer to manage my modest inheritance. My experiment was yielding results exactly as expected, confirming patterns I'd spent years ignoring. The clarity was painful but necessary, like lancing a long, festering wound. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Sophia stood on my porch, nursing bag in hand, her bright smile a welcome change from my somber reflections. "Home visit time," she announced, following me inside. "How are you feeling today, Mrs. Wilson?" "Dorothy, please," I corrected, settling at the kitchen table while she unpacked her blood pressure cuff. "And I'm feeling enlightened." Sophia raised an eyebrow as she wrapped the cuff around my arm. "Enlightened? That's not usually on my patient symptom checklist." I laughed. "It's a recent development." As she checked my vitals and reviewed my medications, I found myself sharing more than medical information. I told her about Gregory's sudden interest in my finances, omitting the lottery win, but including the fabricated inheritance. "People get weird about money," Sophia observed, recording my blood pressure. "When my cousin Pablo won 10,000 in a scratch-off, relatives he hadn't seen in years suddenly needed loans. What did he do? Told everyone he lost it all on a bad investment," she grinned, "then put it toward nursing school for his sister." I nodded appreciatively. "Smart man. Smart enough to protect himself." She packed away her equipment. "Your blood pressure is still elevated. Are you taking your medication as prescribed?" "Religiously." "And stress levels? Your son's sudden financial interest doesn't seem particularly relaxing." I smiled at her perceptiveness. "I'm managing better than you might think. There's something liberating about finally seeing clearly." Sophia studied me, her dark eyes thoughtful. "You remind me of my abuela, my grandmother. She spent 40 years with a husband who barely noticed her. After he died, she said it was like being released from a beautiful cage she hadn't realized she was in. What did she do with her freedom? Everything. Traveled to Mexico to see her childhood home. Took painting classes, dated a man 20 years younger." Sophia laughed at my expression. "She said life was too short for appropriate choices." I thought of Robert's dinner invitation, which I'd accepted for Saturday. At 67, was I finally ready for inappropriate choices? "Your grandmother sounds remarkable." She was. She died last year at 92. "No regrets." Sophia placed a gentle hand on my arm. "She'd have liked you, I think." After Sophia left, I found myself drawn to my closet again, staring at clothes that seemed to belong to a different woman. Sensible slacks, modest blouses, cardigans in neutral tones. The uniform of a woman who didn't want to draw attention, who prioritized practicality over pleasure. On impulse, I called Maggie. "I need to go shopping," I announced when she answered. "Music to my ears," she replied. "What's the occasion?" "I have a dinner date on Saturday." Her shriek of delight probably violated noise ordinances in 3 counties. "With Dr. Dreamy?" "Details, immediately." "Nothing to tell yet," I demurred. "But I need something to wear that doesn't scream retired schoolteacher." "Oh, honey, your entire wardrobe is screaming that, plus sensible shoes enthusiast and early bird special connoisseur. Exactly why I called you." 2 hours later, we were navigating the upscale boutiques at Ridgedale Mall, a shopping center I usually avoided due to its premium prices. Maggie pulled dresses from racks with ruthless efficiency, dismissing anything beige, boxy, or reminiscent of my existing wardrobe. "You need color," she declared, thrusting a sapphire blue dress into my arms. "And shape. You've been hiding in fabric potato sacks for decades." In the dressing room, I confronted my reflection in the 3-way mirror. The woman staring back at me looked both familiar and strange. Still me, with my silver-streaked brown hair and green eyes, but transformed by the dress that skimmed my curves rather than concealing them. The blue fabric made my eyes look clearer, my skin more luminous. "Oh my," I whispered. "Is that good oh my or bad oh my?" Maggie called from outside. I opened the door to her appreciative whistle. "Hot damn, Dorothy, where have you been hiding that figure?" "Under cardigans, apparently," I replied, turning to see the back view. The dress was modest, but flattering, with a subtle drape that suggested elegance rather than effort. "We'll take it," Maggie told the hovering saleswoman. "And those black heels, and that silver necklace." "Maggie, the price tags are not your concern anymore, lottery queen," she whispered. "Consider it investment in your new life." I hesitated, decades of financial caution warring with my new reality. The dress cost more than I would typically spend on an entire season's wardrobe. But then, typically I didn't have $4 million. Typically I didn't have dinner dates with handsome doctors. Typically I wasn't conducting social experiments on my own family. Nothing was typical anymore. "We'll take it all," I agreed. Later, bags stowed in Maggie's trunk, we sat at a cafe with lattes and shared a chocolate croissant. "So, what's the plan for dinner with Gregory and Vanessa tomorrow?" Maggie asked. "More observations for your social experiment?" Exactly. I want to see how they approach this inheritance situation in person. I sipped my latte, savoring the luxury of an overpriced coffee I wouldn't have allowed myself a week ago. I suspect Vanessa will have redecorated my house mentally before dessert. And Gregory will have your $75,000 invested in whatever gets him the highest commission, Maggie added. Probably. The realization should have hurt more, but clarity brought its own anesthetic. The strangest part is feeling like I'm seeing them, really seeing them, for the first time. And what about Dr. Robert? Are you seeing him clearly too? I thought of his text messages over the past few days. Nothing presumptuous or overwhelming, just thoughtful check-ins and gentle humor. A meme about hospital jello. A recommendation for a heart-healthy cookbook that wasn't culinary punishment. A photo of his golden retriever, Max. I'm reserving judgment there, I said carefully. But it feels different. Like he's actually seeing me, not what I can do for him. Maggie reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's how it should be, Dot. That's how it always should have been. As we drove home past manicured lawns and identical suburban houses, I considered the path that had led me here. A random lottery ticket. A cardiac episode. 8 hours alone in an emergency room. Life's funny, isn't it? I mused. A week ago, I was just a retired teacher with angina. Now I'm a millionaire with a social experiment and a date. And killer new shoes, Maggie added, glancing at my shopping bags. And killer new shoes, I agreed, laughing. For the first time in decades, I felt like I was truly living rather than just existing. The irony wasn't lost on me. It had taken a cardiac event to make my heart feel alive again. Tomorrow would bring Gregory and Vanessa, with their agendas thinly disguised as concern. Saturday would bring Robert and possibilities I hadn't considered in years. And beyond that, stretched a future suddenly rich with more than just money. Rich with choice, with agency, with the freedom to finally become the Dorothy Wilson I might have been all along, if life and loss and limitation hadn't intervened. As Maggie pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Looking forward to Saturday. Fair warning, Max has requested I share embarrassing doctor stories to make you laugh. I am, as always, at his service. I smiled, warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with cardiac issues. Good news? Maggie asked, noticing my expression. Just a reminder, I replied, that it's never too late for new beginnings. Gregory and Vanessa arrived at precisely 6:30 Friday evening, their BMW purring into my driveway with German precision. They came bearing gifts this time. An expensive bottle of red wine, heart-healthy mom, and a glossy brochure for a financial services company. The twins remained conspicuously absent. Again. They have swimming lessons Friday evenings, Vanessa explained, air kissing my cheek while simultaneously surveying my living room with the calculating gaze of a real estate appraiser. The instructor is Olympic level, simply impossible to reschedule. Of course, I murmured, accepting the wine from Gregory. I've made pot roast, your favorite growing up. Great, Mom. Listen, before dinner, I thought we could just briefly discuss this inheritance situation. He pulled out his phone. All business. I've been running some numbers. I bet you have, I thought, but smiled pleasantly. Let's eat first, shall we? Financial talk gives me indigestion. Vanessa laughed too loudly. Dorothy, you're too funny. But Gregory's right. With your health concerns, getting this money properly managed should be a priority. My health concerns are precisely why I'd prefer to enjoy dinner first, I replied, leading them to the dining room where I'd set my grandmother's china, an extravagance usually reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Wow, Mom, pulling out the good stuff, Gregory commented, taking his childhood seat at the table. Special occasion? Having my son and daughter-in-law for dinner is always special, I replied, serving the pot roast I'd spent hours preparing. Especially given how busy your schedules are. A flicker of discomfort crossed Gregory's face. Good. Let him squirm a little. The meal proceeded with Vanessa dominating conversation. Her charity committee dramas, the twins' private school accomplishments, their upcoming Vail ski vacation. I nodded and asked appropriate questions, playing my familiar role of attentive audience while observing their performance. Because that's what this was, a performance. Gregory's solicitous inquiries about my medication, Vanessa's sudden interest in my garden club activities, their shared enthusiasm for my pot roast, which Gregory had actively disliked since adolescence. All staged with the precision of community theater actors who hadn't quite mastered subtlety. So, Mom, Gregory segued as I served coffee and the apple pie I'd baked that morning. About Aunt Beatrice's inheritance. I've been thinking. Here it comes, I thought. You really shouldn't keep that money sitting in a checking account. With the right investments, even a modest sum can generate significant returns. Oh? I feigned naivete. The bank manager suggested a simple CD. Gregory nearly choked on his pie. A CD? Mom, those returns are practically insulting. You'd be lucky to get 2% annually. Well, at my age, I'm not sure I need aggressive growth, I replied mildly. Safety seems sensible. But what about your future? Vanessa interjected, setting down her fork without having touched her pie. Care facilities aren't getting cheaper, Dorothy. And there it was, the recurring theme, my convenient institutionalization. I'm quite comfortable in my home, I reminded her, as I've mentioned several times. For now, Gregory agreed. But eventually, you'll need assistance. That money could be your safety net. Or your inheritance, I thought but didn't say. Actually, I said instead, I've been considering some renovations, perhaps updating the kitchen, finally fixing that bathroom tile. The alarm that flashed across their faces was almost comical. Renovations are terrible investments, Gregory said quickly. You never recoup the costs, especially in older homes. And so disruptive, Vanessa added. Contractors dust strangers in your home for weeks. Just preliminary thoughts, I assured them, hiding my smile. Nothing decided. Gregory seized the opening. Look, why don't you let me set up a meeting with my firm's advisor? No pressure, just a consultation. He works with many clients in your situation. My situation? Seniors with modest nest eggs, he clarified. He specializes in preservation strategy. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this generous offer. I'll think about it. Oh, before I forget, would you and the twins like to come for lunch Sunday? I hardly see my grandchildren anymore. Gregory and Vanessa exchanged glances. A married couple's silent communication I recognized from my years with Thomas. This Sunday is tough, Gregory hedged. The twins have makeup tennis lessons in the morning, and then there's the Petersons' brunch. Another time then, I said, keeping disappointment from my voice. I understand how busy family life can be. As they prepared to leave an hour later, Gregory checking his watch repeatedly during the last 20 minutes, Vanessa surprised me by asking about the framed photo on my mantel. Is this new? I don't remember seeing it before. The photograph showed me at 20, standing on a rocky Maine shoreline, hair blowing in the wind, laughing at the camera. It was from my sophomore year college trip, taken by Thomas, though we wouldn't start dating until 2 years later. It's actually very old, I replied. I just recently put it out. You were quite pretty, Vanessa observed, with the faint surprise of someone discovering their kitchen appliance had once won a beauty pageant. Thank you, I said, studying the young woman in the photo. I'd forgotten that girl for a while. After they left, Gregory with promises to email investment prospectuses, Vanessa with air kisses and vague mentions of getting together soon, I stood in my doorway watching their taillights disappear down the street. The evening had confirmed everything I'd suspected and revealed nothing I hadn't already known. My son and his wife saw me as a responsibility to manage, an asset to preserve for their eventual benefit, and an obligation to fulfill with minimal time investment. The knowledge should have devastated me. Instead, I felt oddly liberated. The truth, however painful, was cleaner than the comforting lies I'd told myself for years. I washed my grandmother's china carefully, putting each piece away with deliberate attention. These plates had witnessed 50 years of family meals, joyful celebrations, tense holidays, quiet Sunday dinners. They had outlasted marriages, witnessed children's growth, and absorbed the silent tears of a widow learning to eat alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia, checking in on my favorite patient. Blood pressure behaving? I smiled, typing back. Just entertained my son and daughter-in-law. Surprisingly, blood pressure remained clinical instead of astronomical. Her response came quickly. Progress, or good medication. Either way, victory. Another text followed immediately. Dinner with Dr. H tomorrow, right? Nervous? Was I nervous? At 67, the dating rituals of my youth seemed like artifacts from another civilization. What were the protocols now? What were the expectations? Terrified, I admitted. It's been 37 years since my last first date. Just be yourself, Sophia replied. He already likes that person. As I finished in the kitchen, Maggie called for a full report on the evening's performance, as she'd taken to calling Gregory and Vanessa's visits. Exactly as predicted, I told her, suddenly very concerned about my financial planning, strongly opposed to home renovations, still pushing for assisted living. No twins, of course. Shocked? I am shocked, Maggie deadpanned. And the inheritance bait? Swallowed whole. Gregory's already planning how to help me manage it. Of course he is, she paused. Are you okay, Dot? Really? I considered the question, looking around my quiet house. I'm better than okay. I'm awake. After we hung up, I went to my bedroom and opened the closet where my new blue dress hung, still wrapped in tissue paper. Running my fingers over the silky fabric, I thought of the woman in the photograph. Young, laughing, full of possibilities. Tomorrow, I would wear this dress for Robert. But really, I was wearing it for her. For the Dorothy who got lost somewhere along the way between young adulthood and retirement, between marriage and widowhood. Between motherhood and abandonment in an emergency room, I was finding her again, one decision at a time. My phone lit up with a final text for the evening from Robert. Looking forward to tomorrow. Sleep well, Dorothy. 3 simple sentences that contained no demands, no expectations, no performance. Just connection. I slept better that night than I had in years. Sunday dawned with the particular stillness of Minnesota spring mornings. Birds conversing, dew glistening on fresh grass, sunlight warming the air with promises of summer. I sat on my back porch with coffee, mentally replaying my evening with Robert while physically checking my phone for messages. 2 from Maggie. Details now. And, if you don't call me, I'm coming over. 1 from Sophia. Hope the date was wonderful. Blood pressure check tomorrow. Try not to be too excited. 1 from Robert. Thank you for a lovely evening. Max insists the dog park date happens soon. Nothing from Gregory or Vanessa about my invitation to Sunday lunch, though I hadn't really expected anything. Their performative interest extended only to my potential inheritance, not to actual relationship building. I was halfway through my second cup when my doorbell rang. Maggie stood on my porch in her gardening clothes, trowel still in hand. 8 hours of silence is friendship malpractice, she announced, brushing past me into the kitchen. I've been dying of curiosity. I poured her coffee while summarizing my evening. The restaurant, the conversation, the walk, the goodnight kiss. He kissed you. Maggie clapped her soil-stained hands. Was it good? Was there tongue? Are we teenagers again? We most certainly are not. I laughed, feeling my cheeks warm. It was sweet, appropriate, nice. Nice? Dorothy Wilson, you need a vocabulary upgrade. Nice is for church potlucks and thank you notes, not first kisses after 37 years of drought. Fine. It was promising. Maggie grinned triumphantly. That's more like it. And will there be more promising developments? Second date? Dog park with Max. The dog. Already meeting the family. Moving fast, Dr. Dreamboat. I threw a dish towel at her. Stop it. We're just 2 older people enjoying each other's company. Might keep telling yourself that, Maggie said, dodging the towel. Meanwhile, any updates from Gregory the financial genius? As if summoned by her words, my phone buzzed with a text. Mom, slight change of plans. I'm coming by with Stanley today at 3. Won't take long, just wants to discuss some preliminary investment strategies. No need to prepare anything. I showed Maggie the message. Unbelievable, she muttered. Can't make lunch with his children but can bring a financial advisor on a Sunday. Classic Gregory. Indeed. I felt a familiar disappointment, quickly followed by the newer sensation of clarity. And so transparent. Maggie left shortly after, extracting promises for more date details later. I spent the morning puttering in my garden, enjoying the simple pleasure of coaxing life from soil, a skill I'd honed during decades of limited finances, when growing vegetables was necessity disguised as hobby. At precisely 3 o'clock, Gregory arrived with Stanley Weintraub, a balding man in his 50s with an expensive watch and the too hearty handshake of someone who had memorized how to win friends and influence people. Mrs. Wilson, delighted to meet you, Stanley effused, accepting the iced tea I offered. Gregory speaks so highly of you. Does he? I wondered, catching my son's eyes flick to his phone for the 5th time since arriving 7 minutes ago. Let's get right to it, Stanley continued, spreading glossy brochures across my kitchen table. Gregory mentioned you've come into a modest inheritance. First, let me say condolences on your loss. Thank you. Though Aunt Beatrice and I weren't close, I replied, playing along with my own fiction. Of course. Now, $75,000 may not seem like much in today's economy. Gregory winced slightly at Stanley's tactlessness, but properly managed, it can significantly improve your financial security. Stanley launched into a well-rehearsed presentation about growth potential, management fees, which he glossed over quickly, and the importance of professional guidance for seniors. I nodded at appropriate intervals, watching Gregory's expression shift between professional detachment and poorly concealed calculation. He wasn't seeing his mother sitting across the table. He was seeing a financial opportunity, a commission, a problem to solve efficiently before moving on to more important matters. These particular funds have performed exceptionally well, Stanley continued, sliding a chart toward me. With management fees of only 1.75% annually. That seems high, I interrupted mildly. The index funds I've read about charge as little as 0.04%. Both men looked startled, as if the family dog had suddenly recited Shakespeare. Well, yes, but those don't provide active management, Stanley recovered smoothly. Our expertise justifies the premium. I see. And these managed funds consistently outperform index funds? Gregory shifted uncomfortably. Mom, these are complex financial products. Stanley's team has decades of experience. It's a simple question, I persisted. enjoying their discomfort more than I probably should have. Do your actively managed funds consistently beat basic index funds? Stanley cleared his throat. Markets fluctuate, of course. No investment is guaranteed. So that's a no, I concluded. Interesting. Gregory's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. I need to take this. Work emergency. Back in a minute. As he stepped onto the porch, Stanley leaned forward conspiratorially. Mrs. Wilson, between us, your son is concerned about your financial decision-making given your recent health challenges. The condescension in his tone ignited something fierce within me. My heart may be problematic, Mr. Weintraub, but my brain functions perfectly well. I taught advanced literature to gifted students for 35 years. I've read extensively about investment strategies since receiving my inheritance, and I find your fees excessive and your manner patronizing. Stanley blinked, clearly unaccustomed to such directness from a gray-haired woman in sensible shoes. I assure you, Mrs. Wilson. Furthermore, I continued, warming to my subject, I find it interesting that my son, who couldn't spare an hour to visit me in the hospital last week, suddenly has time for financial consultations on a Sunday. Gregory chose that moment to return, his emergency call completed with suspicious timing. Everything okay? He asked, noting Stanley's discomfort. Mr. Weintraub was just explaining the benefits of active management, I said pleasantly, but I think I'll need more time to consider my options. Mom, these opportunities don't last forever, Gregory pressed. Stanley has agreed to take you on as a favor to me, despite your portfolio being, well, below their usual minimum. The dismissiveness in his tone, the casual devaluation of both my intelligence and my worth, crystallized everything I'd been feeling since the emergency room. I appreciate the concern, I said, standing to signal the meeting's end, but I'll handle my inheritance my way. But Mom? My way, Gregory, I repeated firmly. Now I believe you both have busy schedules to attend to. Looking somewhat shell-shocked, Stanley gathered his brochures while Gregory stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. We'll continue this discussion later, my son said, his tone making it clear he considered my resistance temporary and futile. Perhaps, I replied noncommittally. Give my love to the twins. Since they couldn't come for lunch, maybe next Sunday? Gregory mumbled something about checking calendars as they departed, leaving me standing in my doorway watching yet another set of taillights disappear down my street, becoming quite the Sunday tradition. Instead of the familiar hurt and disappointment, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Pride in standing my ground. Pride in honoring my own intelligence. Pride in finally acknowledging what my relationship with my son had become, rather than what I pretended it was. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Max has demanded we move the dog park date to this afternoon. He's being quite insistent. Free at 5? I glanced at the kitchen table where Stanley's discarded fee disclosure document still lay. Then, at the beautiful spring day outside. The choice between spreadsheets and sunshine, between dwelling on disappointment and embracing new joy, seemed suddenly, blindingly obvious. 5 would be perfect, I replied, looking forward to meeting the real boss of your household. As I changed into casual clothes suitable for a dog park, I caught my reflection in the mirror, smiling, eyes bright, looking more alive than I had in years. The woman who had allowed herself to be abandoned in an emergency room was disappearing, replaced by someone stronger, clearer, and infinitely more interesting. I couldn't wait to get to know her better. Max, the golden retriever, approached life with the enthusiasm of a creature convinced that every moment contained infinite possibility. Within minutes of our introduction at the Minnehaha Dog Park, he had presented me with his tennis ball 17 times, introduced me to every dog within 50 yards, and covered my navy pants with a fine layer of golden fur that I suspected would become a permanent feature. He's usually more reserved with strangers, Robert apologized, retrieving the slobbery ball yet again. Clearly I'm special, I replied, scratching Max behind the ears as he leaned his substantial weight against my legs. Clearly, you are. The simple statement, delivered without artifice or agenda, warmed me more than the spring sunshine. We walked the park's perimeter, discussing ordinary things, his daughter in Seattle and her tech career, my garden plans for summer, favorite hiking trails in Minnesota. Nothing profound, yet profoundly comfortable. Gregory called while I was changing to come here, I mentioned as we settled on a bench, watching Max charm a labradoodle. Left a voicemail about reconsidering Stanley's investment proposal. Ah, the son who left you in the emergency room for 8 hours? I nodded, surprised by his directness. Is he always so attentive to your finances? Only recently, I admitted, since learning about my modest inheritance. Robert's eyes, kind but perceptive, studied my face. And that bothers you? It does, though I feel guilty saying so. He's my son. Being someone's parent doesn't obligate you to accept poor treatment, Robert said, then smiled ruefully. Says the man whose daughter calls quarterly for exactly 15 minutes. What happened there, if you don't mind my asking? He sighed, tossing the ball for Max's 100th retrieval. Melissa blames me for her mother's death. Not directly. Louise died of breast cancer. Nothing anyone could prevent. But I was the doctor who didn't notice symptoms in my own wife until it was stage 4. His voice tightened. Melissa thinks I was too absorbed in my patients to see what was happening at home. She might be right. The painful honesty of his confession touched me deeply. We all have regrets about our children, I said softly. Things we'd do differently if given another chance. What would you change with Gregory? The question caught me off guard. I'd spent decades focusing on what I'd done right as a parent. The sacrifices made, the opportunities provided, the love given. Acknowledging shortcomings felt almost traitorous. I'd set better boundaries, I finally said, surprising myself with the answer. I'd show him that love doesn't mean martyrdom, that relationships require reciprocity. I paused, petting Max, who had returned, tennis ball hopefully deposited at my feet, and I'd stop making excuses for his behavior. That's very insightful, Robert said. It's very recent, I admitted. Amazing what 8 hours in an emergency room can clarify. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics, but my revelation lingered. Had I enabled Gregory's self-absorption through decades of one-sided accommodation? Had my sacrifices taught him that my needs were secondary, optional, dismissible? When Robert drove me home as evening fell, Max sprawled contentedly in the back seat. I felt more centered than I had in years. Not because all questions were answered, but because I was finally asking the right ones. I'd like to see you again, Robert said at my door. Perhaps something more formal than a dog park? There's a chamber music concert at the Ordway next Saturday. I'd love that, I replied, meaning it completely. This time, our goodnight kiss lingered a moment longer, still respectful, but with the promise of deeper connection. As his car pulled away, my phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. Mom, we need to talk about today. Stanley was just trying to help. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't respond immediately to my son's message. Instead, I silenced my phone and ran a bath, adding the lavender oil Sophia had given me for stress management. Soaking in the fragrant water, I considered the contrast between my afternoon with Gregory and Stanley versus my evening with Robert and Max. One interaction had left me feeling diminished, patronized, and valued only for potential financial benefit. The other had left me feeling seen, respected, and appreciated simply for being myself. The choice between these energies seemed suddenly, blindingly obvious. Monday morning brought Sophia for my scheduled home visit, her bright smile and no-nonsense manner a welcome presence in my kitchen. Blood pressure is better, she announced, making notes in her tablet. Still taking medications as prescribed? Religious about it, I confirmed. The chest pain hasn't returned. Good. And stress levels? How was the financial meeting with your son? I grimaced. About as expected. Condescending advisor, pushy son, assumptions about my cognitive abilities. Sophia rolled her eyes sympathetically. Typical. My Tio Juan won a small settlement after a car accident. Suddenly his children became investment experts overnight. What did he do? Told them he'd donated it all to his church, she grinned. Then bought himself a vintage motorcycle he'd wanted since he was 20. Goes riding every Sunday while they think he's at mass. I laughed, delighted by the image. Smart man. Smart enough to know happiness doesn't wait forever. She packed her equipment efficiently. Speaking of which, how was the date with Dr. Harris? Lovely, I admitted, feeling myself blush like a schoolgirl. We're seeing each other again Saturday. Good for you. Sophia's approval seemed genuine. Life's too short to waste on people who don't appreciate you. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, making lists. A teacher's habit never quite abandoned. The left column contained obligations, and the right, choices. Under obligations, I listed my doctor's appointments, medication schedule, bill payments, and necessary home maintenance. Everything else, every relationship, every activity, every expenditure of time and energy, went under choices. Gregory's name headed the choices list, followed by Vanessa, the inheritance deception, my volunteer work at the library, the garden club I'd joined but never quite enjoyed, and the church committee that had become more duty than spiritual fulfillment. Seeing my life categorized this way brought startling clarity. I'd been living as if everything were obligation, when in fact most things were choices. Choices I could reconsider, choices I could make differently. My doorbell rang, interrupting my revelation. Maggie stood on the porch, waving a newspaper. Have you seen this? She demanded, spreading the real estate section on my kitchen table. Your neighbor's house just sold for $375,000. That dump is half the size of yours with none of your updates. I blinked, studying the listing. The Johnson place, 3 doors down, A modest rambler similar to mine but with dated interiors and a smaller lot. Minneapolis real estate has gone crazy, Maggie continued. Your place has to be worth at least $450,000 in this market. An idea began forming, nebulous at first, then crystallizing with surprising speed and clarity. What if I sold it? I asked quietly. Maggie stared, as if I'd suggested setting the house on fire. What? But you love this house. All your memories with Thomas, raising Gregory. Yes, but I gestured to the freshly completed columns on my notepad. What if those memories are keeping me tethered to patterns that no longer serve me? What if this house has become more museum than home? Dorothy Wilson, what has gotten into you lately? Maggie studied me with equal parts concern and admiration. First new clothes, then dating, now real estate upheaval? Life, I replied simply. Life has gotten into me, finally. Later that evening, I called a realtor, not the one Gregory had suggested multiple times for when you're ready for that assisted living transition, but one Maggie recommended from her cousin's recent sale. Just an assessment, I told Lisa Reynolds over the phone. I'm not committed to selling yet. Of course, she agreed, but it's always good to know your options. How about Wednesday morning for a walkthrough? As I hung up, my phone buzzed with another text from Gregory. Mom, getting concerned by your silence. Need to talk about these investment decisions before you make a mistake. Dinner tomorrow? I'll bring the documents Stanley prepared. The old Dorothy would have acquiesced immediately, grateful for her busy son's attention, accepting his assumption of superior financial acumen, accommodating his schedule without question. But that Dorothy had been left in an emergency room for 8 hours. This Dorothy, the one emerging from decades of self-abnegation like a butterfly from a too long chrysalis, typed a different response. Sorry, I'm not available tomorrow evening. Taking a watercolor class with Maggie, perhaps next week? Then I added, before I could reconsider, and Gregory, while I appreciate your concern, I'll be making my own decisions about my finances. Love, Mom. I pressed send before I could second-guess myself, then sat with the momentary anxiety that followed, the lifelong fear of disappointing my only child, of asserting needs that might inconvenience him, of existing as more than just his supportive mother. The anxiety peaked, then receded, replaced by something that felt remarkably like freedom. I'll take it, I said, standing in the sun-drenched corner unit of the Mississippi River lofts. The words emerged with such certainty that I surprised even myself. Lisa blinked. Don't you want to think it over? Measure for furniture? Consider the HOA fees? But there was nothing to consider. The moment I'd stepped into the space, with its 16-foot ceilings, exposed brick walls, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing the Minneapolis skyline and river below, I'd felt something click into place. Recognition, rightness, home. Sometimes you just know, I replied, moving to the windows that would frame my new life. I can make an offer today. 2 hours later, I sat in Lisa's office signing paperwork. My offer, slightly below asking price, but with a quick closing timeline and no contingencies, would be submitted by end of day. The realtor for my house would place it on the market the following Monday, after a weekend of minor staging and professional photography. This is unusually efficient, Lisa commented as I signed the last document. Most clients take weeks to decide, especially with a property in this price range. In this price range, the condo cost nearly as much as my house would sell for, leaving little financial cushion beyond my lottery winnings, a detail I still hadn't shared with anyone, except Maggie. I've spent decades being cautious, I explained. It's time for a different approach. Lisa smiled, a hint of admiration in her expression. Well, Mrs. Wilson, I think you're making an excellent choice. This building rarely has openings, and the location is unbeatable. I floated home on a cloud of adrenaline and possibility, stopping at a small bistro for a celebratory glass of wine, another small rebellion against decades of practical living. Sitting on the patio, watching Minneapolis professionals hurry past in their end-of-workday exodus, I called Maggie. I bought a condo, I announced when she answered. A loft downtown with a view of the river. Her squeal of delight drew stares from nearby tables. Dorothy Wilson, you magnificent rebel. When can I see it? When do you move? Does Gregory know? If the offer's accepted, I'll close in 3 weeks. And no, Gregory doesn't know yet. I'll tell him once everything's finalized. He'll have opinions, Maggie warned. He always has opinions, I agreed. But this isn't his decision. Damn straight. Her voice softened. I'm proud of you, Dot. It takes courage to change your life this dramatically, especially alone. I'm not really alone though, am I? I have you, Sophia, Robert. Speaking of the good doctor, have you told him about your big move? Isn't his place nearby? I haven't told him yet. But yes, he lives about a mile away. I sipped my wine. But that's coincidental, not causal. Maggie's tone was pure skepticism. Just like it's coincidental that you've had that special smile ever since your first date. What special smile? The one you're wearing right now, just talking about him. I touched my face self-consciously, realizing she was right. It's early days, Maggie. We're just getting to know each other. At our age, early days is a luxury we can't afford. Life's short, then you die. Speaking of which, when are you going to tell people about the lottery win? The abrupt pivot to my secret millions made me glance around nervously, though no one was paying attention to a gray-haired woman having wine on a patio. Once I'm settled in the new place, I decided. One bombshell at a time. Fair enough, but promise you'll let me be there when you tell Gregory. I want to see his face when he realizes his budget-conscious mother is secretly loaded. After finishing my wine, I walked home through neighborhoods transitioning from single-family houses to the more urban landscape that would soon be mine. The familiar weight of my house key in my palm felt suddenly temporary, an artifact of a life I was already leaving behind. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Thinking of you today. Hope your mysterious appointment went well. Still on for the concert Saturday? I smiled, that special smile Maggie had identified, and replied, appointment was life-changing actually. Can't wait to tell you about it Saturday. His response came quickly. Intriguing. Now I'll be distracted with curiosity for the next 48 hours. Cruel woman. The playful exchange, so different from my communications with Gregory, all logistics and obligations and thinly veiled agenda, warmed me as I turned onto my street. The for sale sign would go up in my yard Monday morning. By summer's end, this walk home would belong to someone else's routine. The thought brought not sadness, but anticipation. Not grief, but possibility. As I approached my driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked in front. A sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows and a vanity plate that read, Vanessa 1, my daughter-in-law, unexpected and unannounced. I found her on my porch, immaculately dressed in what I recognized as this season's designer collection, scrolling through her phone with manicured fingers. Vanessa, I greeted her, hiding my surprise. This is unexpected. She rose gracefully, air kissing my cheek with practiced precision. Dorothy, I was just in the neighborhood for my Pilates class and thought I'd stop by. Hope that's all right. In the 15 years she'd been married to Gregory, Vanessa had never just stopped by. Her visits were scheduled, brief, and usually accompanied by Gregory as buffer. This unprecedented social call could only mean one thing. She was here on a mission. Of course, I replied, unlocking my door. Come in. Would you like some tea? Sparkling water if you have it, she requested, following me inside, still trying to drop those last 5 pounds from the Vail trip. I bit back the observation that her rail-thin frame hardly needed reducing, and retrieved a bottle of Pellegrino I kept for rare guests who found my tap water insufficient. So, I said, settling across from her in my living room. What brings you by, Vanessa? She took a delicate sip of water before answering. Gregory mentioned you're thinking of selling the house. I wanted to see if I could help. Help? With the process. It's so overwhelming. All the details, the negotiations, the financial implications. Her smile was practiced sympathy. And at your stage of life, it's easy to make decisions based on emotion rather than sound planning. There it was again. The assumption that my age equated to diminished capacity, that I needed guidance, management, supervision in my own affairs. I appreciate the concern, I replied neutrally, but I've engaged a very competent realtor. Yes, Lisa Reynolds. Gregory mentioned her. Vanessa's tone suggested Lisa ranked somewhere between carnival fortune teller and snake oil salesman. But real estate is just one aspect. There's the question of where you'll live afterward. I'm exploring options. Gregory and I have been talking, she continued, setting down her water with purpose. We think this might be the perfect opportunity for you to consider Whispering Pines. Whispering Pines? It's a lovely continuing care community in Eden Prairie. Very exclusive, excellent amenities. They have independent living apartments, but also assisted living and memory care facilities as needs. Progress. The euphemism for cognitive decline wasn't subtle. How thoughtful, I managed. But I'm not interested in a continuing care community at this time. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression a masterclass in concerned condescension. Dorothy, I know change is frightening at your age, but wouldn't it be wonderful to be in a place where everything is taken care of? Where you'd have peers your own age, activities, dining options, medical staff on site? It sounds like a very nice facility, I acknowledged, for someone who needs that level of support. I don't. Not yet, she agreed. But thinking ahead is so important. And with the proceeds from this house, you could secure your spot now. They have a waiting list, you know. I studied my daughter-in-law's perfect features, seeing beyond the practiced concern to the underlying calculation. Vanessa didn't care about my well-being. She cared about containing the potential complication I represented. about neatly packaging my remaining years into an institutional setting where I would require minimal time investment from her and Gregory while preserving maximum financial benefit. Actually, I said, making a spontaneous decision, I've already found my next home, a loft downtown. I made an offer this afternoon. Vanessa's carefully composed expression faltered momentarily. A loft? Downtown? But Dorothy, that's not practical at all. The crime, the noise, the lack of suitable companionship. I find it very suitable, I replied mildly, and quite practical for my interests. But the cost! Downtown real estate is ridiculously overpriced. You'd be spending all your proceeds plus eating into your savings. How would you fund long-term care when the time comes? The genuine alarm in her voice might have been comical if it weren't so revealing. What truly frightened Vanessa wasn't concern for my welfare, but fear for my finances. Finances she and Gregory clearly viewed as their eventual inheritance. I'll manage, I assured her. I've always been quite careful with money. Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, then stood with sudden urgency. Gregory needs me home. But Dorothy, please, don't do anything hasty with this house. At least talk to Stanley again before committing to this loft idea. I walked her to the door, maintaining my pleasant expression through another air kiss, and promised to think carefully about my decisions. As her Mercedes pulled away, I felt not anger, but a strange gratitude. Vanessa's transparent agenda had only reinforced what the emergency room abandonment had begun to teach me. I was a means to an end for my son and his wife, a responsibility to manage, an asset to preserve, but not for much longer. Not in my new loft with its river view and proximity to theaters, restaurants, and, yes, Robert's townhouse. Not in my new life, funded by lottery millions they knew nothing about. Not in my new reality, where Dorothy Wilson finally, belatedly, gloriously put herself first.